such a deep movie. I think there's a reason that we have a lot to talk about here, and I feel like we're still skating over some things. But I think we've got to the point now where we've got to come down. Book versus movie.
You can start. Yeah,
you can start.
I know where I'm at. Yeah. Welcome, friends, to episode 316 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Andrei Tarkovsky's 1972 film, Solaris. We've made it again to a master of film. We talk about these people, I would say at least once a year. We've talked Kurosawa, we've talked Hitchcock. We're now on to Andrei Tarkovsky. And this was one that I've always been excited to do, and I knew was based on a book, and Stalker is as well as something that I'd like to do at some point from Tarkovsky. But you started telling me, hey, look, I know I've heard of Tarkovsky. I would really love to do Solaris, and this is something that we've been talking about basically all year that we wanted to cover. And I was so excited because I'm like, as like a film nerd, this is that kind of filmmaker that like blows everything open for, you know, people in film school and just anyone who's interested in the history of film and like the influences and again the masters who kind of like have created the language of film as we know it. Getting to dive into Andrei Tarkovsky and getting to watch this film, which is so highly meditative and so highly interpretive. It's just such a joy. It's so fun, and I'm so glad we get to talk about this. We talked the book last week, the Lem novel, and that was tons of fun, and that brought up like really deep conversations. And now we're here to the film, which I've said before is one of my favorite sci-fi films I've ever seen. So wow. Let's dig into it. What did you think of this film?
So I am a little intimidated coming into this because you have like well established the sort of pedigree here. I know that the people who are watching this are likely going to be really, in-depth film people, or maybe some sci-fi fans who like Lem and are curious about it, and maybe some of our just regular listeners. Thank you for checking this out. And we're going to try and look at it, from two perspectives, I think. You, someone who studied it in film school and who has done a lot of research, and you've seen it multiple times now, and me, who's just watched it once. I paused it a few times while I was watching. I rewound a little bit, went back to certain scenes. I wanted to look at like certain things again, but really just one viewing of it. And I didn't do any research. I didn't watch any essays. I didn't read anything. So I'm trying to come into it with just like my perspective on it, watching it after having read the book. Now, the book also does give me a lot of background information on what's going on in the movie, so I think that does give me a leg up in that regard. But yeah, that's my background coming into this. A little nervous. I had fun watching it. I like slow movies, and I've talked a lot about how I really enjoy when a filmmaker will slow down and let me experience a scene. So let me get transported into the moment. A lot of times things will start really coming to light as the more you look at it, the more you start to notice things. And there's something that the filmmaker is telling you, like, this is important. We're going to look at it for a while. And I do think there's an unfortunate trend today of just really rapid, like 3-second scenes. We're just going to move on. Actually, I don't even know what the official amount is, but I know there's like a very famous, like, certain length that a lot of modern films hit, right? And then they move on to a new scene.
Yeah, are you saying shot?
Shot, yeah, maybe that's what sorry, I'm using my terms wrong already in this film episode. Yes, shots.
Typically, yeah, like 3 seconds is like the norm for, I think, or the average nowadays for like Hollywood films is like 3 seconds cut, 3 seconds cut.
Yeah, and I don't know what the length is for this, but I just imagine this is one of the longest on average for any movie we've covered yet. It felt that way to me.
It's got to be up there.
It's got to be up there, right? And so all that is to say, like, I like that stuff, although I did feel myself still having to like stretch my mind to like get used to it, because some of the scenes went on for so long, or some of these shots, I guess, were held for so long that I'm like, why are we still looking at this? Like
to make you ask the question, why are we still looking
and like
at this?
and I kept asking the question, and then like there's a whole sequence where they're just like driving on the highway that goes on for like 3 or 4 minutes.
Oh, it's like 5 minutes. Yeah,
it's really long, and I was like, this is the most baffling sequence I think I've ever tried to figure out in a movie. I have no idea why this is going on so long, and I started like coming up with like just rapid fire brainstorm of like why this could be, but still that's one I'm going to want to talk about with you because I don't know why it went on that long. And so that's the thing. Like I went at this and I was kind of giving it all kinds of benefit of the doubt of like there must be some profound reason. Sometimes I felt like I was catching on to it. Other times I was like I have no idea what it is. So overall, I think I really enjoyed this movie. I don't know that I would say it's like one of my favorite sci-fi films or anything like that yet, but I'm open to like discussing it with you and maybe like you'll help me unlock it a little bit more. So I'm kind of like waiting to see. And I haven't even made my decision yet for the end where we're going to say book versus movie, what's best. Because I want to wait and talk about this thing with you.
Yeah, I think once you understand Tarkovsky, the context of when he's making the film and his style, his stylistic choices, you're going to understand like that this isn't just singular to this movie, right? Like he doesn't just have these long takes in this film. This is a thing that he does in all of his films. And I think the more you realize that he's trying to like get to the spirituality or the essence of a film and like what makes it tick and what makes the human experience, and in a way he's like trying to figure out what makes humans tick in the artistic space while telling a story about what makes humans tick in terms of like why do they exist and like sort of some of the existentialism that the book sets up and that this clearly deals with. He's the type of filmmaker that just like he makes you think, that's like that's the hallmark of somebody like Tarkovsky.
Well, I've definitely been thinking a lot about this movie ever since I watched it. This is one also where I feel like we're deep down the rabbit hole of like the kind of shit we're really into, but I'm not sure how many people are going to be following us. So if you are here watching us on YouTube or listening to this on audio, we appreciate you. And if you could leave us a comment, let us know you're here. Let us know you're excited about this, weigh in on the things we bring up. This is one where having some engagement will actually really help make sure that this gets seen by people.
Yeah, and I think it's like we do some of these projects for us, and we know that like there are people out there that engage with these, even though it's a 1972 like Tarkovsky very art house film.
Yeah, Russian movie, watching it with subtitles. I'm like, this is not a movie a lot of our American audience are going to have watched, unless they're big film nerds, probably.
But it is the type of film that I think warrants conversation. It's the type of film that you are going to walk out of a theater and be like, what was that? What did we just witness? What was it meant to? What was it meant to evoke? Yeah, I think that's again like dialing into that will help ramp up or down your enjoyment. I think if you want a blockbuster, which this is almost an anti-blockbuster, it's just not what it is going to be. So like the sci-fi conversation becomes often like people. This is one of the most highly regarded sci-fi films that's ever existed, and there's so much influence that goes on. And I can't help but think of like Alien and specifically Ridley Scott Blade Runner when I watch this film.
Oh yeah.
You look at some of the sci-fi design, and it's funny because Tarkovsky is someone who actually like disliked the genre, this is coming out after 2001: A Space Odyssey, and we can dig more into his thoughts on American sci-fi films of that time period.
Yeah, curious to hear that because that's another one we've covered. I love that movie, by the way. I also want to put out there that I don't want this episode to feel like gatekeepy for people, like because there might be people who've seen this movie and are like, I didn't like it, it was boring, or I didn't understand it, or I think I understood it, but that's still not interesting to me. Like, and I think all of that is valid. Like, I want us to go ahead and put that out there that like you don't have to like anything. And like we're gonna talk about it. Maybe that'll help you like think about it in a different way. But if you still ultimately be like, I don't like movies like this. Like I think that's totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's a person who it's art, right? So if you go to a museum and you look at all different types of art, there's going to be something that just doesn't speak to certain types of people.
Right.
I would argue as the filmmaker on the podcast that this is a film that has an incredible amount of substance and layers to it, that if you're willing to go down the rabbit hole, it will be rewarding to you. I guarantee it. But again, we don't want to gatekeep it and say, oh, you're wrong if you don't like it.
Yeah. It's just not, I don't know. I'm not interested in doing that. I'm the same way with literature. Like there are so many amazing books that people, think are the must reads of the genre and stuff. And then if you read them and you're like, I didn't really like that, you'll get all these people who are like, oh, you don't understand sci-fi or you don't understand literature. And, I just don't want to ever be like that. That does make me wonder about you, though, because you said you've seen this before in school, but like, is this your first time watching it since then? And what was your experience like?
Yeah, I've seen it a few times since. Anytime a massive sci-fi film comes out, like I remember when like Interstellar came out, I rewatched Solaris. I try to rewatch it just to like remind myself of like why I love this film. I talked about this some last week, but I love the idea of the story being one that's like sci-fi is typically about the tech. It's about futurism. It's about a lot of things that go into, those are like the main components of sci-fi storytelling. And I thought that this is so interesting because it's a story about like humanity and humanity's reflection in sci-fi and like that exploration aspect. Mm-hmm. And then I think Tarkovsky really took that and distilled it into something that he wanted to talk about, which was like the human experience and like what it can mean to know something or try to know something or try to know yourself, and like the ways that maybe humanity takes for granted some of the things that we have in search of, something that we don't necessarily have a grasp on. And in reaching out and doing that, it's like this futile thing that we possibly could kind of stay grounded and stay more here on Earth and work through. That's to kind of like, I guess, point in the direction that I think Tarkovsky was going in. But again, I think there's many ways that you can interpret this film. For me, I just love the way that he goes about threading the story and making it about the two main characters, which are Kelvin and Hari. And that relationship to me in the book, because I'd already seen the film, it actually left me wanting more. I was like, oh, okay, like this is a different kind of story. Felt like the book story was much more interested in the entity, this being that we don't know a lot about, and talking about its effects on these people and really digging into maybe some of the world, that world's science of what they've developed and what they're trying to figure out and communicate. And that book spent a lot of time going down that path. I think that the film reels back and says, well, that's a like framing device here. The real thing that Tarkovsky is maybe pointing to is, while this is a supernatural occurrence that's happening, or maybe not supernatural, maybe scientific, but we just don't understand it in some way as a manifestation of our consciousness is like reflecting back and showing grief and trauma and like all the things that even in the void of space you're going to encounter because you're so attached to your own physical body and your own physical consciousness. So it's endlessly fascinating, and I swear every time I watch it I walk away feeling like slightly different about what Tarkovsky was setting out to do here.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I would just say I think the book does talk about those things. But you're right, because I think it's just like a matter of proportion, right? Like the proportion of the book that is about Hari and their relationship versus trying to understand Solaris as an entity is a lot different than the proportion of the movie is devoted to each of those things. And much less of the movie is about trying to understand Solaris as an entity. And at times I felt like if I hadn't read the book, I don't know that I would know like what the hell is causing this, and like it's the connection to it feels so tenuous at times. Like we see shots of it, but like if you have to really be paying attention, I think, to catch on to what's going on. Whereas the book, like it does a little more like, let's talk about all the different theories around this planet and like what could be going on. And you get all the history of the way they've studied it over time. So I really like that science part of it too. But I can see that the effect makes it feel like the emphasis is a little more spread.
Here's what I would ask you then. When I was reading the book, I felt like the relationship was there between Hari, but it was a strained one where you were like, okay, like this isn't really a person. To me, I'm like, it's maybe asking or posing the question, like I talked about last week, maybe like a Blade Runner-esque question of like, is this a living being? Mm-hmm. But I think the film digs into that much, much farther, where it's like that idea of like, if this is a manifestation of consciousness, what does it mean to have the memories and everything else that's tied into consciousness and what it means to be a person? Like, does that mean that person truly exists or doesn't? And some of the trauma that goes along with that. But Mike, the question I was going to pose is, did you feel more emotional in the book or the film?
I agree that I think the movie emphasizes it more. It is more at the heart of the story the movie is telling. I did find that in the book. I remember distinctly there were parts with Hari and the way she was analyzing her own thoughts and saying that she doesn't remember anything about, being a part of Solaris. She doesn't have any connection to that. She feels like she is herself in some ways, but at other times she doesn't feel like herself. And she has all these questions about what does that make me then? And a lot of her story plays out the same way. But again, I think it's a question of proportion, because those sections are relatively shorter compared to the rest of the book. And it seems to me like Tarkovsky read the book, and that was the stuff he really latched onto and was like, I'm going to make this movie about this primarily. And the rest of the stuff is maybe slightly less de-emphasized. So yeah, to me, I think it's just a matter of proportions. But I agree, it does have an emotional effect to focus more on that part of it.
On character, yeah. I also would say, like, it's possibly like a medium shift here too. Like, there's something about seeing a relationship, and one that's believable in my opinion by the performances and the way that, like, there is this dreamlike quality to this film as well, where, like, when we see these people manifesting, and specifically Hari manifesting, some of these shots where she's like backlit, and the way that, like, the love that's there, and love is, like, I think more centered in the movie. It's talked about more. It's clear that, like, love is kind of a central metaphor that Tarkovsky is playing with here. Of, like, I would argue that the film almost is pointing to love being the meaning of life and the reason that humans exist in a lot of senses. And so in that way, kind of tying that together, it makes it much less sci-fi. It goes much less sci-fi than the book does. The movie
feels a little less ambivalent about the whole thing than the book did. The book like proposed certain things that could bring meaning to our existence and to what's going on here. But often you are left with the feeling of, like, that could be an interpretation, but it also equally could be invalid. And maybe it doesn't mean anything. And, like, it kept coming back to this neutral state of, like, as much as you think you might know, everything I've told you is in question and may not be true. And there's another side to it that could be proposed. And this movie definitely felt like it had a few messages that it was more trying to focus on.
And that's to say, like, that's one interpretation of the work as well, right? Like, I would say that love thing is something that I'm completely pulling out of the film. I don't think that it's beating you on the head with that by the end of it. But let's talk about Tarkovsky as a filmmaker, and I think it's going to recontextualize a lot of the work here. So Tarkovsky was a Soviet film director and screenwriter, widely considered one of the greatest and most influential directors in cinema history. Tarkovsky's films explore spiritual and metaphysical themes and are noted for their slow pacing and long takes, dreamlike visual imagery, and preoccupation with nature and memory. Tarkovsky studied at Moscow's VGIK under filmmaker Mikhail Rom, and subsequently directed his first 5 features in the Soviet Union: Ivan's Childhood, Andrei Rublev, Solaris, Mirror, and Stalker. A number of his films from this period are ranked among the best films ever made. After years of creative conflict with state film authorities, Tarkovsky left the country in 1979 and made his final 2 films abroad. Nostalgia and The Sacrifice were produced in Italy and Sweden, respectively. Tarkovsky was the recipient of several awards at the Cannes Film Festival throughout his career. He was also awarded the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival for his debut film, Ivan's Childhood. In 1990, he was posthumously awarded the Soviet Union's prestigious Lenin Prize. 3 of his films, Andrei Rublev, Mirror, and Stalker, featured in Sight and Sound's 2012 poll of the 100 greatest films of all time. So in 1939, Tarkovsky was enrolled at a Moscow school, and then during the war, he evacuated to Yurevets, living with his maternal grandmother. In 1943, the family returned to Moscow. From November 1947 to spring 1948, he was in hospital with tuberculosis. Many themes of his childhood, the evacuation, his mother, and her 2 children, the withdrawn father, the time in the hospital, feature prominently in one of his films, Mirror. It's said that in his school years, Tarkovsky was a troublemaker and a poor student. By 1954, he applied to the State Institute of Cinematography and was admitted to the film directing program. This was in the early Khrushchev era, which offered good opportunities for young film directors. Before 1953, annual film production was low, and most films were directed by veteran directors. After 1953, more films were produced, and many of them were done by younger directors. The Khrushchev thaw relaxed Soviet social restrictions a bit and permitted a limited influx of European and Northern American literature, films, and music. This allowed Tarkovsky to see films of the Italian neo-realists, French New Wave, and of directors such as Kurosawa, Buñuel, Bergman, Bresson, Vaida, and Mizoguchi. Vaida in particular, his film Ashes and Diamonds highly influenced Tarkovsky. So as you can tell, most of Tarkovsky's work is notable and is well awarded, and really changed the landscape of film.
How many of those have you seen, by the way?
So Tarkovsky has 7 feature films: Ivan's Childhood, Andrei Rublev, Solaris, Mirror, Stalker, Nostalgia, and The Sacrifice. I've seen Andrei Rublev, Solaris, Mirror, and Stalker, and I think like 3 of the Solaris, Mirror, and Stalker are on the bookshelf behind me. Like, they're incredible films.
Nice. Yeah, Stalker's the one that I've had recommended to me and that is high on my list for if I was going to watch another one here. Is there another one that you would recommend out of those that you think I would enjoy? Mirror for sure. Yeah. Okay.
But let's get through this conversation first, and then we'll talk about Mirror, because again, extremely contemplative and interpretive in a lot of ways. So let's talk about Solaris in Tarkovsky's work here. This was Tarkovsky's attempt to bring greater emotional depth to science fiction films. He viewed most Western works in the genre, including 2001: A Space Odyssey, as shallow due to their focus on technological innovation. Some of the ideas Tarkovsky expresses in this film are further developed in his film Stalker, which we've talked about a few times here. So interestingly, Kubrick actually named Solaris as one of his most beloved films, but Tarkovsky criticized 2001 for being sterile. In its 1970 interview, he called it a lifeless schema with only pretensions to truth, as well as a cosmetic vision devoid of human emotion. Again, I'm going to just throw out some details about this person. He was very devout Christian.
Okay.
He is very opinionated about his work and art in general. He does a lot in his films to infuse like classic works of art, a lot of paintings, a lot of these like master works that tie back into his cinematography, and a lot of like the themes that he pulls back into. When he talks about Kubrick in 2001, I don't agree with that shit. I love 2001: A Space Odyssey. I love Stanley Kubrick.
That take, yeah.
But this is somebody who's like so singular in vision, and you can tell by their filmmaking that they're just like that auteur director. They're going to be correct in every way. And again, the entire film community would say that Tarkovsky is allowed to feel this way because he also created some of the greatest films ever known. But they are the type of films that lead you back to some of those details that I told you, is that he's very interested in high art that is classic in nature and also is considered very important.
So I think there are a couple kinds of great artists out there that I've noticed across mediums, and this happens in the writing world all the time too, where there are some writers who are just like uber fans of writing, and they'll have all these favorite authors, and they will often talk about their favorite books as they read them. They'll praise many books that are coming out. They seem like they're just kind of fans of writing, right? And then you have the brilliant writer who is a very specific fan of a very specific kind of writing, and it's the kind they do. And they often look at the lens of every other piece of art out there as like, how much does it align with what they value in art? And to them, that is the highest, like utmost, what you should be chasing. And like, we're all, I think guilty of this at times, but like, this is the most important thing, is that you align exactly with me and what I do, what I value in writing, or as much as possible. Right. And sometimes you'll get those kinds of writers who will like heavily criticize other like famous, well-regarded pieces of work because it is very different than what they do, along whatever spectrum. And to me, it sounds like a bit of that is going on here, where it's like Tarkovsky makes his movies in the way that he makes them, and he feels like this is the way they should be done. This is what we should be talking about. And when people don't line up with that. And then I think there is also an element of like, when he's criticizing someone like Kubrick, this is probably somebody who he's been compared to a lot. This is a contemporary who is also regarded really highly by critics. So he has this sort of interest in trying to say, like, I'm better than him. He's trying to, kind of get himself a place among the greatest of all time. One way to do that is to distance yourselves from others that you're being compared to and say, actually, they're not as good as you all are thinking because you're not seeing this thing about them. So I don't know, maybe some of that's going on here.
Well, and he's also highlighting, like, I think Kubrick became the target of this because people often said that this was a response to 2001: A Space Odyssey. So it's like, oh, you're kind of dunking on what you kind of disagree with in art and in sci-fi in general. But he also has stated he didn't like sci-fi for a period of time because he felt, like I said, he felt that it was kind of a lot of what Kubrick had in his 2001 was like a synthesis of it all. And it was like the lightning rod for it because people would trot that out as the best sci-fi they'd ever seen. And I think he feels that, like, what he likes, and clearly what he doesn't. But he feels that, like, the sci-fi that's interested, I think the futurism element, like the sci-fi that's interested in the technology and like what else is out there and what if we, get big enough to go beyond ourselves on Earth. I think he's just like inherently against that. He's very much into like the self-introspective meditation and nature and life and humanity and the way that we interact. Yeah. So like, it's just like a difference of,
I can see why he was drawn to Lem's novel, because
right.
As we talked about, Lem's novel was also very much against sort of the American version of sci-fi, and didn't even like to be sort of talked about in the same way. And it seemed like the book he wrote was an attempt to do something different and to propose a different way to look at space exploration and first contact. So I can see that maybe those two, Tarkovsky and Lem, there was some alignment there, and it makes sense that he chose this book to adapt now.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Lem because he was actually involved a lot with the development of this film. In 1968, Tarkovsky had several motives cinematically for adapting this Lem science fiction novel, Solaris. He admired Lem's work, firstly, and second, he needed work and money because his previous film, Andrei Rublev, had gone unreleased and his screenplay, A White Day, had been rejected. In 1975, it was released as The Mirror. A film of a novel by Lem, a popular and critically respected writer in the USSR, was a logical commercial and artistic choice. Another inspiration was Tarkovsky's desire to bring emotional depth to science fiction genre, which he regarded as shallow due to its attention to technological innovation. So you have to think of this in terms of like the USSR, and previous leadership with the USSR was not allowing all this like French New Wave and all this other new art that was coming in that Tarkovsky was directly influenced by. So there was still an element of censorship that was going on there, though. Like they still had to abide by the rules of basically the party. Like they would have to run the scripts by, and they would have to be okayed. And so often there were things that would have to get pulled out and things that would have to get added. He saw Lem's novel, which was able to get created, as a way to make something in that space and to say something that he wanted to say.
And we talked about how Lem specifically chose to write sci-fi because it was a way to evade censors. Because
exactly.
Government censors looked at sci-fi and they're like, oh, it's light, it's for children, it's not serious. And Lem was like, all right, I'll write some sci-fi then. I can write whatever I want, seemingly.
Using that space to evade censors was just a brilliant move. And again, he was a fan of Lem's work.
Yeah.
They collaborated and remained in communication about this adaptation. In the novel, Lem describes science's inadequacy in allowing humans to communicate with an alien life form because certain forms, at least, of sentient extraterrestrial life may operate well outside of human experience and understanding. So that's what we dug into last week. Although Lem worked with Tarkovsky and Friedrich Goldstein in developing the screenplay, he maintained he, quote, never really liked Tarkovsky's version of his novel. Tarkovsky wanted a film based on the novel, but artistically independent of it, while Lem opposed any divergence of the screenplay from the novel.
One of those. There are some authors out there who are like, you need to do it exactly like I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, different time. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt for that. And then also, like, everybody wants to think they're right, I guess, at a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, I respect it, even if I don't necessarily agree with it personally. I can see why people feel that way.
So Lem went as far as to say that Tarkovsky made crime and punishment rather than Solaris, omitting epistemological and cognitive aspects of his book. But Lem also said in an interview that he had only seen part of the finale much later after Tarkovsky's death. Tarkovsky claimed that Lem did not fully appreciate cinema and expected the film to merely illustrate the novel without creating an original cinematic piece. Tarkovsky's film is about the inner lives of its scientists. Lem's novel is about the conflicts of man's condition in nature and the nature of man in the universe. For Tarkovsky, Lem's exposition of that existential conflict was the starting point for depicting the characters' inner lives.
You hear about this sort of thing. We do all the time. We're covering adaptations, right? Sometimes authors, I think they get a little bit prideful when it comes to adaptations that are getting lauded as this is like one of the greatest movies ever made. Because I think part of them is like, but my book is better. You know what I mean? And like they want to point people back to the book, and they don't want the credit to start all getting like taken and being applied to the movie. We've seen this a few times in the podcast.
It's unfortunate. I like to make sure that the author gets their due as well, because often, it does get absorbed into the film because that's what people are talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously this book is the framework for the story, even though he goes in a totally different direction in a sense. The story's all there, like all everything Lem created.
It's really just, I think, a matter of different emphasis. I don't even know that it's that different. It's actually, it is kind of like, faithful in a lot of ways. I was kind of surprised at how faithful it was. I actually do want to point listeners and viewers, if you haven't watched our episode on the book, we always kind of talk about the movie and we reference things back to the previous episode we've done on the book, and we kind of assume that people have watched it or listened to it, even though they often don't. Just because it's easier for us. We don't like recapping things too much, although we will do a little bit of a plot synopsis here coming up. But if you're coming into this and it seems like a kind of conversation in process, that's why we always kind of do that.
I mentioned that he eventually fled basically the Soviet Union. He didn't really flee, he just left, but I want to give some context as to why that happened. In 1979, Tarkovsky began production of the film The First Day, based on a script by his friend and longtime collaborator Andrei Konchalovsky. The film was set in 18th century Russia during the reign of Peter the Great and starred Natalia Bondarchuk, who is in this film as well, and Anatoly Papanov. To get the project approved by Goskino, which was like the production company there in the Soviet Union, Tarkovsky submitted a script that was different from the original script, omitting several scenes that were critical of the official atheism in the Soviet Union. After shooting roughly half the film, the project was stopped by Goskino after it became apparent that the film differed from the script submitted to the censors. Tarkovsky was reportedly infuriated by this interruption and destroyed most of the film. At this point in his career, one of the biggest international filmmakers there is out there, and he was still being censored, and clearly he was trying to evade those censors, the troublemaker coming out in him seemingly, just like leaving out scenes and deciding like, all right, I'm just going to shoot this and put it together. What the fuck are they going to do? He was stopped and he destroyed the film. Eventually he traveled to Italy, where he shot Voyage in Time in the summer of 1979, and he would eventually shoot Nostalgia in 1982 there. When he was shooting Nostalgia, though, Most Film was a production company that was there. All right, so Goskino was actually a part of the government there. There was like the committee for cinematography that was the censors.
Oh, okay.
Most Film is the production company. So Most Film withdrew funding for Nostalgia that was being shot in Italy. So then he went and got financial backing from an Italian production company. When he completed this film in 1983, it was presented at Cannes, where it won quite a few awards, but Soviet authorities were lobbying to prevent the film from winning the Palme d'Or, a fact that hardened Tarkovsky's resolve to never work in the Soviet Union again. So you can see like it built up in a major way, to where like eventually in Milan in 1984, he announced that he would never return to the Soviet Union and would remain in Western Europe. He stated, quote, "I am not a Soviet dissident. I have no conflict with the Soviet government, but if he returned home, he added, quote, I would be unemployed." At that time, his son Andriosha was still in the Soviet Union and not allowed to leave the country. On August 28, 1985, Tarkovsky was processed as a Soviet defector at a refugee camp in Latina, Italy, and was officially welcomed to the West. So just had to leave his own country due to censorship and seemingly like maybe some pressure with his son still being in the country. Mm-hmm. And then in December of 1986, he actually passed away. A conspiracy theory emerged in Russia in the early 1990s when it was alleged that Tarkovsky did not die of natural causes but was assassinated by the KGB. Evidence for this hypothesis includes testimonies by former KGB agents who claimed Viktor Chebrikov gave the order to eradicate Tarkovsky to curtail what the Soviet government and the KGB saw as anti-Soviet propaganda by Tarkovsky. Other evidence includes several memoranda that surfaced after the 1991 coup and the claim by one of Tarkovsky's doctors that his cancer could not have developed from a natural cause.
Wow.
So he passed of cancer.
So he developed cancer, but people are theorizing that he was like essentially given cancer.
It seems that way, but that's, again, it's called a conspiracy theory here. Tarkovsky, his wife Larissa, and an actor, Anatoly Solonitsyn, all died from the same type of cancer. Vladimir Sharon, a sound designer for Stalker, was convinced that all three died to exposure to chemicals released from a chemical plant upstream from where the film was shot.
Wow. That's awful. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, shit like that also happens, right? People get exposed to a substance, and that can all develop cancer. I mean, look at people who were first responders on 9/11, all developing similar cancers from what they're exposed to that day. So.
Yeah, and like you and I have obviously seen Chernobyl as well, and we know like how that goes, and kind of what went on with the Soviet Union during that period.
Yeah, just thinking about someone making these kind of movies at that time and how closely he would be watched. It's interesting to think about.
More about his background. I mentioned he was deeply religious. He was Orthodox Christian. He believed great art should have a higher spiritual purpose. He was a perfectionist, not given to humor or humility. His signature style was ponderous and literary, having many characters that pondered over religious themes and issues regarding faith.
Yeah, and that's a big difference between him and Lem, because otherwise these guys sound kind of similar in a lot of ways. But Lem was not religious. He was I think atheist, and then later in life said atheist/agnostic. And it really seemed like he was exploring the idea of Solaris as an entity, and the entity that is, the ocean on Solaris, as like a proto-god-like being, but not in the sense of like actual, Christian God, but more like there could be an entity out there that would be as if a god to us, and yet it might not care about us in any way, and it might not even think about us in the way that we can conceive of. And that is, to me, is sort of an agnostic's look at what a deity might actually be like if one existed. And I find that stuff really fascinating because that aligns with like how I feel about the universe. But I could see that someone who is like deeply religious would take a very different message out of this book and want to explore something more spiritual in a way that aligns with their views, I guess.
Once you understand that he's a man of faith like that, it recontextualizes some of the film as well, and I think you can appreciate it for the things that he imbues in that.
I cut what I thought was a biblical reference, which we'll get to, so I think this confirms that it probably was.
Yeah. So to talk about Tarkovsky's cinematic style, in a 1962 interview, he argued, quote, "All art, of course, is intellectual, but for me, all the arts, and cinema even more so, must above all be emotional and act upon the heart." I've talked about his films are categorized by metaphysical themes, extremely long takes, and images often considered by critics to be of exceptional beauty, which this film is just chock full of some of the greatest shots I've ever seen in my life. Just like, just thinking of the shot of the teacup in the rain, or some of the shots, like I mentioned before, that sort of orange backlighting that Hari has when she lifts up that blanket as well that has the holes in it. Some of these shots just like have stuck with me since I saw this film. But also recurring motifs are dreams, memory, childhood, running water accompanied by fire, rain indoors, reflections, levitation, and characters reappearing in the foreground of long panning movements of the camera. He once said, quote, "Juxtaposing a person with an environment that is boundless, collating him with a countless number of people passing by close to him and far away, relating a person to the whole world, that is the meaning of cinema," which I find to be just fascinating and interesting. He developed a theory of cinema that he called sculpting in time. By this, he meant that the unique characteristic of cinema as a medium was to take our experience of time and alter it. Unedited movie footage transcribes time in real time. By using long takes and few cuts in his films, he aimed to give the viewers a sense of time passing, time loss, and the relationship of one moment in time to another. And again, so that kind of like, the pacing of this film, I think, is the most unapproachable part of it for like the typical moviegoer at this point. And like knowing that like it's not there as like a pretentious move. It's there because he truly believes that moment, like he said, the unedited movie footage transcribes time in real life. Is like that's the time going by. He's very aware of it to make you think about that time passing, to show it going by, to see the time being lost in a lot of cases. Ingmar Bergman, who's another incredibly well-regarded filmmaker.
That's a name I've heard, but don't know that I've seen any.
One of the greatest filmmakers of all time, commented on Tarkovsky. My discovery of Tarkovsky's first film was like a miracle. Suddenly I found myself standing at the door of a room the keys of which had until then never been given to me. It was a room I had always wanted to enter and where he was moving freely and fully at ease. I felt encountered and stimulated. Someone was expressing what I had always wanted to say without knowing how. Tarkovsky is for me the greatest, the one who invented a new language true to the nature of film as it captures life as a reflection, life as a dream.
Love it.
So just heaping praise on this person at this point, but we're going to talk about this film and how all of those things come together, and how it speaks to a filmmaker and a writer in today's day and age, and like what that means, what this film ultimately means, especially in comparison to that source material. Psychologist Chris Kelvin is sent on an interstellar journey to evaluate whether a decades-old space station positioned over the oceanic planet Solaris should continue to study it. He spends his last day on Earth with his elderly father and a retired pilot named Burton. Years earlier, Burton had been part of an exploratory team at Solaris, but was recalled when he described strange happenings, including seeing a 4-meter-tall child on the surface of the water of the planet. A panel of scientists and military personnel dismissed these visions as hallucinations, but now that the remaining crew members are making similarly strange reports, Kelvin's skills are needed. After leaving the house, Burton tells Kelvin that he recognizes the child's face as that of one who was orphaned due to the disappearance of one of the Solaris explorers. Upon Kelvin's arrival to the Solaris research station, he finds it in disarray. He soon learns that his friend among the scientists, Dr. Gabarian, has killed himself. The 2 surviving crewmen, Snout and Sartorius, are erratic. Kelvin also catches fleeting glimpses of other aboard the station who were not part of the original crew. He finds that Gabarian left him a cryptic farewell video message warning him about the strange things happening at the station. The video shows 2 appearances of a little girl who should not be aboard the station, with Gabarian asking Kelvin if he has seen her and insisting he is not insane, and should strange things happen to Kelvin, it would not be Kelvin having gone insane.
Okay, so we got to back up because that jumps to what's going on in the station, but the first 45-ish minutes of this movie are not on the station at all. They are back on Earth, and as we've talked about, contemplative scenes play out. We see Chris Kelvin walking among water, sort of on some sort of land. It looks like kind of swampy. There's reeds kind of blowing in the water, and we watch those for a while. He's got a little box with him, little metal box. We don't know much about it first. He's just like looking out at nature and just like being very sort of silent and contemplative. And then Burton arrives, and we start to find out that Burton is there, that this older man is Chris Kelvin's father, and they're at this house that is itself a replication of an older house that the grandfather grew up in or something, and this is now like a remake of that. And he even says like, I don't like new things at one point. There's a lot going on here. We spend a lot of time here. They watch this video at one point kind of recounting what happened to Burton. And then there's the long drive sequence we talked about. But I think we should focus in on this because this is all stuff that is not present in the book. The book really picks up with Kelvin arriving at the station. And at that point forward, it's where I would say is a lot more close to what happens in the book. But this is all basically added context and added layers. Although the Burton story is pretty similar to something that happens in the book. But anyway, the idea of him coming as like an older version of himself and like talking with Chris Kelvin before he even leaves, that didn't happen in the book.
My interpretation of this part has always been that grounding that Tarkovsky was more interested in than I realized Lem was in the book, right? Like Tarkovsky wants to emphasize the beauty of nature here, and then he juxtaposes it with this like grimy, shitty station that they end up on.
Yeah.
But this part is here to emphasize like the connection or lack of connection that Kelvin has with his dad, clearly. It starts to set up like some of the grief and loss that he has in his life with like his mother not being there. It's his aunt who's around. And yeah, those moments. Clear on
that, by the way, there's a couple of characters that wasn't clear on their relationships to one another. It took some, some time before I figured out. Even Burton, I wasn't sure was supposed to be the same guy until like a certain point. I was like, oh wait, this is the same guy. Okay,
I forgot that as well. Like that's something that like I was like, oh shit, of course it's Burton, and like he's right, because I think it's intentionally misleading for a period of time when he's like turning it on and off up until the end, and then at the end of it he's like,
there's like one cut too where it cuts from him as a young version to the old version. You realize it's like the same actor who's I think just wearing different makeup.
This is possibly the best like young and old depictions of characters I've seen, especially from this time period. Like
really good,
the young version looks legit, and
so much where I couldn't tell if they were making an older person look younger than he was in the video,
exactly,
or a person who looks like he did in the video look older. I think probably the latter, but I wasn't sure.
And they do it with Kelvin's father as well for a flashback sequence. He's much younger, and he looks so convincing as well. I'm like, holy, did they film these 20 years apart? Like, how did they pull that off? It looks excellent. But that's just beside the point.
So I just have some random observations I'd like to rattle off about this part. One, Chris Kelvin, very unusual looking and behaving sort of protagonist. Now, that lines up with what we got in the book, too, but I was just thinking about how Hollywood would probably cast someone who looks much different than this. And sure enough, we get George Clooney cast later, right? In another version of Solaris. This is not what, our protagonists usually look like in Hollywood. That was kind of refreshing. I thought, and again, like every time I say something that might be considered critical, I am realizing that I could be jumped on all over for this. I didn't particularly love him as Chris Kelvin here. I thought he was okay, and like, but like there were times where I wasn't fully buying performances. Like, I don't know, like there's a lot of brilliant stuff about this movie. I didn't find his portrayal of Chris Kelvin to be super memorable to where I'm going to be like talking about this performance again.
Yeah, I mean, to let you off the hook, neither do I. I don't think that he's the reason that the movie...
Not that we're the arbiters, but,
No.
Okay.
I think Hari, the woman who plays Hari, is the standout.
That would probably be the standout, yeah. And even Snout was also very good. Like some of the other people around him. I really like Burton. I thought that performance was good.
But I think that he embodies the role well enough, but it doesn't like transcend it. He's not the star of the film to me, and the film really works because I think of Tarkovsky and some of the other performances that kind of he can be the constant, this character.
And the reason I bring that up is I do think that these slow contemplative scenes and moments often shine best when I'm getting a spectacular performance, and like I can see something going on the face, behind the eyes, that is really drawing me into the movie and making me want to participate in this moment in a way. And I wish I had gotten a little more of that. And not to say that it wasn't attempted. It just, I wasn't feeling as drawn as I have been to other more magnetic performances in the past.
Yeah, I think those contemplative scenes are so much more about like the idea this person's a psychologist. And like I think the whole movie can be read as the introspective, the look in by a psychologist into himself. Mm-hmm. And like those scenes are like meant to use like the external, which film has to do, use the external to evoke the internal. And I think ultimately like that's often what I got.
Yeah,
I don't know
language
that the
of the scene was good.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that, but the performance wasn't necessarily the thing.
Yeah, the performance was he's there in a lot of scenes, and he did fine. I have no complaints. I just didn't think that he was the star. Yeah. But I do think that like him bouncing off of what he's given to do is what like evokes a lot of that emotion and what evokes a lot of like the I think intent of the scenes.
So some of my favorite moments from this section is when Burton is speaking with Chris Kelvin's father inside the house, and they walk from two different corners of the house, and they have this conversation that spans both of them. They start out at this one window inside, and I think maybe this is two different moments I'm conflating, but the frame itself is gorgeous. There's like all these like there's a plant growing over it. There's a water vase or something. There's a bird cage, which I noticed had 3 birds in it, 1 blue, 2 yellow, which I thought might be reference to our 3 men who are trapped on Solaris station later, kind of in a bird cage. Although,
You're right.
admittedly, I came back for that one. I came back to look at that scene and tried to look for more symbolism, and I think I caught that one.
Nice.
And this is a moment that very much evoked like an old painting to me. I was like, this feels like a classical painting almost. And while they're talking, this is like a single take. It goes on for a long time, and children are playing outside, kind of like perfectly timed. And then I think even within the scene, they also like walk. The guy who's talking like turns and walks around and goes outside, and then keeps speaking to him through the window, which also really shows off like the reality of the space. It really transported me and made me feel like this is an actual house. I'm in a place and I'm not on a set. And whether or not that's true, I don't know, but like it felt that way for sure. And then I think there's even a moment where we then kind of walk to the other corner, just around the corner, and there's another similar window, but it's looking at a different part of the yard. And it's also beautifully framed, and it has, like there's I forget who it was, or maybe I didn't recognize, but there's like a statue of, it looked like Socrates or somebody like that, in one corner, probably not Socrates, but somebody like that. There's a lot of just little references. There's a lot of like books, and this looks like a very like educated house. It's kind of warm, familial, and I also got the sense, especially upon reflection, that this was Tarkovsky establishing the vividness of this place in Chris Kelvin's mind, so that later on in the movie, when we see it replicated, we would buy that would be possible, because this is clearly a place that he knows intimately and is able to perceive intimately, and sort of lives in his mind. And like a perfect replication of it is possible. So that was all great. And then we got the sequence you kind of referenced earlier where it starts raining. And he's standing outside getting soaked. And you look over at the table, and it's been set for food. There's like food, there's bread, there's fruit. One of the pieces of fruit has a couple of bites taken out of it. There's this saucer with tea, it appears. Or some dark liquid, maybe coffee, I don't know, that's getting rained on. And I was like, this is an important moment, clearly. I caught a couple things there. I thought first off, the fruit with it also prominently has like a big ant, it looked like, or some sort of insect was on it. And so to me, this was evoking Garden of Eden and fruit from the tree, the forbidden fruit, the forbidden knowledge, which often is something that you'll see brought up with reference to technology and humanity's sort of maybe overreaching, or, going somewhere that we shouldn't be able to go, and it's forbidden knowledge. And then there's sort of a price associated with that. And to me, there being this big insect on it made it feel a bit wrong, which sort of evoked that feeling. And knowing that he was so religious, I thought maybe that was something.
And did you feel like Kelvin staying in the rain, is this part of him sort of like experiencing rain on Earth and everything like that before he leaves, or did you feel that there was some symbolism there as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like a moment where he seems like he makes the choice. I'm not going to like go inside. I'm just going to stand here and sort of let it wash over me. You could say that he's living in the moment. He's experiencing life on Earth. Maybe he has some trepidation about he might not ever come back. It seems like maybe there is some fear around this trip he's about to take.
There's a lot of tension with that too, with the family, and just I feel like even if you were 100% sure you wanted to go on that kind of journey, any person leaving Earth would have these moments of like, holy shit, this is it. This is everything. It's I may never feel this again. I may never see this again. So it's really heavy stuff in that way. And it's unnatural to leave Earth in that way too.
Totally. And there's a lot of equating Earth with home, with, where we're from. And there's, his father talks a lot about like, you're too harsh or something to go out into the cosmos. It's too fragile out there. Earth can handle you, but not the cosmos, which was an interesting statement. Yeah. But the water also, all the water imagery, him contemplating the waters, he's standing out there looking at it, the way we're looking at it, the rain, because it's all tied together. I kept thinking, like, if you're going to a planet where the entire planet is covered with a single organism that is said to have some sort of brain or thinking power, that would imply that any weather systems are also picking up parts of this entity and redistributing it, right? And much like water on our planet. So he also could be sitting there thinking about this entity and how the forms it's going to take. And I think that's where I was looking at the saucer and seeing the rain entering the saucer and diluting it. And to me, that was like an acknowledgement or foreshadowing of the influence of the ocean being something that's going to penetrate and be unavoidable to an extent. It's going to enter him like it enters the saucer here.
I love that. That's a great, not something I had thought, but
okay,
absolutely see that. Yeah,
cool.
That's a great interpretation. I love that we're diving into that, because now I'll look for that next time I watch the movie. These shots too, like there's an early shot where he's like standing in some reeds with this like fog behind him that he walks through, and then these shots of the reeds like in the water being like they're really cool. Kind of dragged under.
They're
the
moving
shots.
with these underwater currents, really just beautiful in and of themselves. But then also, again, when I'm thinking about the idea of he's looking at this water and thinking, what would it be like if this was an entity? I kept thinking about that because I'd read the book, so I knew that's where we were going. Although, admittedly, the film doesn't really tell you that until later.
And once you know later what the character has been through, like you realize, okay, so this person has lost his wife to suicide. So just thinking about like how that's weighing on this character, and we don't even realize it, like you said, because we don't get Hari until like an hour into the film. And like, so that just, again, it kind of asks for a rewatch there too, to immediately know.
Yeah,
like,
I think we know he's a haunted character. He is being very contemplative, and it's asking us to like maybe theorize as to why. And it looks like there are multiple reasons it could be.
And like you can see that he's like, anyone who takes on a mission like this is a possibly like not a suicide mission, but this is a mission that you might not come back from. And like in leaving Earth behind, there has to be some motivation towards that. Like what would lead someone to say like, you know what, I'm going to leave everyone I know and everything I know behind, and I'm going to go pursue the cosmos in this way. And this is kind of getting back into that, like what humanity is looking for in the world. This is a lost figure, someone who's lost themselves seemingly. And like literally before he leaves, he's throwing all of his work, all of his life's work, everything into a fire and burning his earthly possessions and
which was strange. I'm like, why is he doing this? Like, I couldn't really figure it out.
I think it's because he's like, I'm not saving anything for the trip back, right? Like he's like,
taking some stuff with him, and the rest of it he's burning.
He's not coming back. It's
but
like,
he talks about like, if I don't come back. So there is like, he's leaving the door open to him returning, but it does seem like, why would you burn all this stuff unless you are kind of thinking you're not going to come back?
I think he's saying one thing and his actions are showing another.
Interesting.
And I do want to talk about when he's burning that. I love the use of like black and white, color, and sepia.
I want to ask about this because I don't know if I'm thinking about this the right way. But to me, when I'm watching a movie that employs both black and white and like a different color palette and then color, there's something being conveyed consistently with each choice. Like when we're showing black and white, we're showing something. When we're showing this color, we're showing something. When we're showing color, we're doing something else. And so to me, I'm like, maybe I just saw like Oppenheimer, right, where it's like different colors meant, oh, this is a different time, right? And when they watch the movie, when they watch the recording, it's in black and white. And I was like, okay, so this is something that is being perceived through a camera lens. Maybe we're watching a movie of something. It's not real life. And then also I started to think, well, maybe this is out of time. Is this conveying to me that instead of this being in the present of the moment where it feels like it occurs, this is actually a scene that is occurring late in the movie, and is more of a memory? Am I watching a memory now, and it's lost its color because it's not present? I'm not sure, and by the end of it, I still wasn't sure why some scenes were black and white and others weren't, other than like it had a feel to it. But I was like, what is the message? And is that something that has been determined, or is that still like up for debate?
So from what I can tell, he used it to, you can tell that like the vivid color sequences are Earth, right? Like typically there's plenty of vivid color sequences.
Well, like we talk when he's burning the stuff, that's black and white, and that's black on Earth.
I think he's using it psychologically versus like we were saying for
giving some sort of context for the
flashbacks
scene.
Or dreamlike sequences and things like that. Though I do think he also uses black and white and some of these other things, like the sepia tone footage, to evoke like dreamlike states in a couple of cases. And like the black and white was used most often for like the communication devices and things like that. But then a scene like this, my interpretation of it is, in that scene we're seeing a human who is losing humanity or who has less humanity.
Losing connection to Earth too. Right.
Yeah.
Getting ready to leave.
those vivid sequences that we were just talking about with these reeds and the water and the leaves and everything, so colorful, so much saturation, and then you take all that away and you get like this monotone, just like very drab imagery that I think is like Tarkovsky's signal that this is what he's going into. What he's doing, what he's currently doing, is effectively trying to cut off his humanity, maybe cut off some of the grief and some of the trauma that he has, leave it here on Earth and go search the cosmos. And in that way, he's like losing some of his humanity. I think that's what Tarkovsky is trying to get at, is like there's something to be gained by staying here, and by going out there, you're kind of like fighting nature and doing something unnatural.
Okay. So maybe the colors thing was fucking with me a bit more than it should have been, because I was trying to like decode it, you know? Like this means something specific, and maybe it was more vibes.
I do know that I think it was a bit vibes, but Tarkovsky had a thing against color footage for a while too. He felt that it was like kind of a gimmick, and it was like a thing that like Hollywood was using to get people in. Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, I can use this effectively."
Someone grew up on black and white film and has a fondness for it, is what that feels like to me.
But then eventually he became a master of using black and white photography.
I mean, the color sequences here were absolutely beautiful.
Agreed.
So, a couple other things about this part before we move on.
The driving part, yeah.
We got the driving part. We can talk about that now, I guess. The driving part, I don't know. Sitting here at this moment, I can't tell you why it goes on for as long as it does. We've had very interesting, contemplative moments here, and then we get this sequence in the car. Burton has called with like some sort of car phone, which I thought was pretty cool, like a video phone. And he has this conversation, and he talks about how the child that he saw that was 4 meters tall looked just like the orphan of the man who had died that he went and saw later, and he realized they looked at the same thing. So it's our first sign that like maybe Solaris itself is making something out of the memories of the people who are there. So I'm like, okay, cool, that's a good bit of information to reveal. You know, seems to hang up the phone, I guess, although we don't ever see like any of that, but like the call ends, and then we just get these cars driving on these highways, and it goes on for so long, and there's like weird soundscapes going on. Sometimes it's like the sounds of the cars on the highway. Then it gets kind of futuristic-y sounding. And I'm like, oh, are they trying to imply that these are like electric vehicles and they sound different? But then like there's something else going on with the sound. It gets pretty discordant. I did, as I'm staring at it, trying to figure out what's going on, it felt like we were showing the city as almost a living entity itself, like the arteries going through the body and like all these, many different lives sort of traversing the city. There's something beautiful about that I've noticed just looking at cities myself. And so I was thinking about that as I'm looking at it. And it's also very loud and chaotic. And then eventually at the end of this really long sequence, we cut immediately to the sort of serenity of Chris Kelvin standing by the water again. So I was like, okay, well, that moment works as like a drastic difference. But why does it go on for so long? That's my question.
So I think most people will tell you that Tarkovsky is the type of filmmaker that like perfected and really carved out the kind of filmmaking where like they give you a lot to think about. And then like within the film, if there's not that breathing period to like kind of interpret what just happened, you will become lost. Or there will be areas of it that you haven't considered coming to the end of the film. So I think there's a multi-purpose thing happening here. One is we just gave you a shitload of information and stuff to think about. And imagine also having not read the book.
Yeah.
Like you're going in watching this film, you've never read the book.
Yeah.
This is all new context for you, and you're trying to figure out like what are we doing here? What's going on? And just like
this is, by the way, this is Burton, who seems to be just on his way to like the airport maybe, or just going home, and he's just in a car and he's just driving on the highway, and we watch it for, no joke, 4 or 5 minutes straight.
Yes. So again, I think it's a period of time for you to be like, what do you do when you're in a car? You sit there and think. You know what I mean? When you're driving down the highway and you're looking, you just think. Things are going through your head. I think that's part of it. I like your interpretation of the city like being a living organism, because I think that's definitely a part of it as well. It's a Soviet film that shot this in, I think, somewhere in Japan. I can't remember.
Yeah,
exactly
I think I saw like Japanese or Chinese characters. Not really. I'm not 100% sure.
So it shot in Japan, which wasn't easy to do at the time. So they wanted to make it like, it had an emphasis for a reason like that. But like we get those, like you said, the converging like highways and everything like that. We see it's almost like a circulatory system, or like it's like, or like ants in a like, working in unison. So like there's all of those things that go into it, but the length of it, I think, is to sit there and contemplate it. I also was thinking, because it gets so discordant.
You're telling me it's bathroom break, go take a piss.
I'm sure plenty of people feel that way, honestly. Like if you know, I think there's websites out there you can look. I guarantee that this would
be on the Run P app.
Yeah. So the other thing that I thought about is like these sounds are really interesting. Like you said, the sounds of the cars are what stand out to me, because it's otherwise a very banal like scene where you're just like, okay, we're just driving in the car. The sounds are technology, which is something that I feel that like to a certain extent, Tarkovsky is almost against.
Yeah, it felt like it was like, look how loud this is. It's not as beautiful as nature. Although, to me, there is still a certain beauty to it. And I don't know if that was something that was intended or not, but like I still see certain beauty to it.
And I don't remember exactly how the scenes stack up against one another, but while the 5-minute scene was going on, I also started looking at like, there's a lot of tunnels that he's driving through and different ways like that. And the noises, like you said, get pretty loud at some point. And I almost felt like, is this some sort of like visualization of like the journey that our character Kelvin is about to make that we don't see?
He's
like
about
a travel
to leave.
through. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like almost like rocket sounds or sci-fi sounds or something like that.
Yeah. There's
like
there's something weird going on with the sound here for sure.
So I think that's part of it as well for me, but then it cuts to him in nature. So it's not like if it cut to him on the station, that would be different. That would be like, oh,
so it cuts
that
to him
really
back
emphasizes his journey
at the house in black and white. And I don't know, like I feel like I'm at the edge of a theory here. But I don't know. It seems like it's not upheld by anybody else. So maybe I'm completely wrong. But like, we cut back to the black and white of the house. He's burning the things. He's talking to his father, and I guess this is his aunt. I wasn't sure of the relationship. I wasn't 100% sure. And then he interacts with this horse, and this horse has been a mysterious figure already.
Scary.
Because the kid is like afraid of the horse. The dog barks at the horse, but the kid is also kind of strange. A little bit. This is Burton's child, it seems like, or the child who's with Burton. Because he also like pops up behind Burton, almost like little jump scares. Burton's talking, all of a sudden, like, kid jumps in the back, like, and you're like, whoa, I didn't know that kid was there.
Well, I guess we haven't even addressed that, like, this movie is kind of a horror movie in a way.
Without like, ever really feeling like horror, though? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, like there's some stuff going on that could be perceived.
I think we said the same thing about the book, though.
Yeah,
too,
that's
right?
true.
Like, there's elements that are like kind of like sci-fi horror.
But what's going on with this horse? Because like the horse is behaving kind of strangely. They're afraid of it, and then after they leave, the horse is now out of the barn or wherever it was being held and is roaming the sort of yard freely. Comes walking up to the house, and it's the last thing Chris Kelvin looks at before we transition to him on his way to the station. And the first thing that happens on that transition on him onto the station is he doesn't know he's left yet. They're like, you're already on the way, when he asks like when we're going to get going. And so to me, that was like everything I just saw was in black and white. He's already maybe on the way there. And as soon as we start talking about someone's maybe already on the way there, maybe he's already there. I don't know. Like, is this somehow like Solaris already in his mind? Is the horse some representation of an alien entity, and it's invaded his memory? Because we also see horses in the room. It was Gabarian's room, I believe. There's like images of this horse prominently, multiple of them, and it looks like exactly the same horse from his memory. So it almost feels like all of this black and white stuff didn't really occur, and that it's like a memory or a dream, or it did occur, but it's not occurring now. It's occurring in the past. And it's being influenced by Solaris at this point.
This is so Tarkovsky, right? Like, I don't have answers for you because it's intentional. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? If there's horses that are appearing in multiple areas, and I thought, honestly, what's funny is that I thought you were going to go the route of saying like the kid that was orphaned was Burton's kid, like the kid, like he had adopted the kid, and there's something weird about the kid or something like that.
And there is like a moment where the kid's like behind him, looking at him kind of strangely, and there's an interaction between Burton and the kid that feels like there's some secret maybe that hasn't been conveyed that they are both aware of. And I don't know if that's true, but it's just like the impression I got from watching it.
Knowing that Tarkovsky plays so much with dreams and memory and all that stuff is like, you may be right in saying that like the film is like some sort of like version of events that happen after he's already been affected on the station by the entity on Solaris. Dreams and memories are also like can play tricks on you in a sense,
Sure.
and memory is never
and they're also
like,
imperfect,
solid.
right? Like
Right.
as much as we're like evoking it, memories, especially in my experience, are never as vivid later on
Yeah.
because I don't have a great memory. So like I'm often frustrated with the lack of detail that I'll find in memories. I'm like, I wish I could remember everything vividly, but I just can't. I only remember certain things, and everything else is kind of vague, or like black and white, maybe you could say. But I think it's important to note that like everything that he is bringing with him to the station becomes important, right? And whether that's a memory of a horse, memory of his wife who died, memory of his father, memory of this house, all of this becomes very important to what Solaris is able to. And I'm just referring to this entity as Solaris. I don't know that lines up with how we should be doing this, but it just is like an easy shorthand for me. So I'm going to call the entity Solaris, even though it is itself the ocean, not the planet, for whatever distinction you want to make on that.
So to continue on with the plot here, after a fitful sleep, Kevin is shocked to find Hari, his wife who died 10 years earlier, sitting in his sleeping quarters. She is unaware of how she got there. Terrified by her presence, Kevin launches the replica of his wife into outer space. Snout explains that the visitors or guests began appearing after the scientists conducted radiation experiments, directing X-rays at the swirling surface of the planet in a desperate attempt to understand its nature. That evening, Hari reappears in Kelvin's quarters. This time, he calmly accepts her and they fall asleep together in an embrace. Hari panics when Kelvin briefly leaves her alone in the room and injures herself attempting to escape. Before Kelvin can give first aid, her injuries spontaneously heal before his eyes. Sartorius and Snout explain to Kelvin that Solaris created Hari from his memories of her. The Hari present among them, though not human, thinks and feels as though she were. Sartorius theorizes that the visitors, also called guests, are composed of neutrino systems rather than atoms, but that it might still be possible to destroy them through use of a device known as the Annihilator. Later, Snout proposes beaming Kelvin's brainwaves patterns at Solaris in hopes that it will understand them and stop the disturbing apparitions. In time, Hari becomes more human and independent and is able to exist away from Kelvin's presence without panic. She learns from Sartorius that the original Hari had committed suicide 10 years earlier. Sartorius, Snout, Kelvin, and Hari gather together for a birthday party, which evolves into a philosophical argument, during which Sartorius reminds Hari that she is not real. Distressed, Hari kills herself again by drinking liquid oxygen, only to painfully resurrect after a few minutes. On the surface of Solaris, the ocean begins to swirl faster. Kelvin falls ill and goes to sleep. He dreams of his mother as a young woman, washing away dirt or scabs from his arm. When he awakens, Hari is gone. Snout reads her farewell note, in which she explains how she petitioned the two scientists to destroy her. Snout then tells Kelvin that since they have broadcast Kelvin's brainwaves into Solaris, the visitors have stopped appearing and islands have started forming on the planet's surface. Kelvin debates whether to return to Earth or remain on the station. Kelvin appears to be at the family home seen at the beginning of the film. He sinks to his knees and embraces his father. The camera slowly cranes away to reveal that they are on an island in the Solaris Ocean.
So let's back up. I think the entire dream sequence is probably its whole discussion of itself. So let's focus on what happens before that. The arrival of Hari. We touched on already earlier, so I don't want to repeat a lot of it. I do think that this is a great performance here. I did find it interesting that I found this actor and the one who plays his mother in these memories, they looked really similar to where there were times...
they had the same hairstyle at times.
Yeah, there were times where I couldn't tell which one it was, and I had to be like, wait a minute, this is the mom, or wait a minute, this is Hari. And there were also moments where they would like swap in and out. And I was like, this has to be some sort of intentional interplay and sort of equating the two with each other. It's like the woman in his life, a source of love, a source of, men often see women as like the thing that allows them to be soft and allows them to open up to somebody and experience love and sort of more tender emotions that otherwise they deny themselves. I don't know if that's what Tarkovsky was talking about here, but I thought about that. And the idea that Hari and his mother swapping in and out was interesting, right? It seemed to say something about his relationship to her.
Well, it's like an Oedipus thing too, right?
Yeah,
Possibly with the mother, yeah.
So, that was fascinating. He does completely change once he realizes who Hari is and what she represents. We still have the moment where he fires her into space in the rocket in kind of a silly moment where
very silly.
He jumps behind an instrument panel and the fire just like lightly singes his back and he like has to roll to put it out. And they're like, oh yeah, make sure you're not in the room when you launch the rocket. That's a little dangerous.
It's like, there's a big red button on the outside. You can launch that rocket from the outside.
Whoops. And there's a couple moments like that, admittedly, where as much as we're talking about like this incredible filmmaker, and he is, there's things where I'm like, we found better ways to do some of this. Some of the moments where like he was traveling on his way to the station were a little hokey to me.
I actually kind of like how that looks. Like, I don't know, it still looks pretty interesting to me today.
Yeah, it's interesting the way the camera moves and stuff.
I love the lighting
the
across
light on
the
the
eyes.
I do really like. I did really like that again because it told me that we're like in his mind and like he's already starting to lose it. He doesn't even know where he is yet. That was all cool. But some of the sound effects were a little funny.
So I've heard interpretations of this as, while obviously 2001 looks a certain way, right? Mm-hmm. Very clean, very sleek surfaces, very in every way. And then here we're getting that kind of dirty sci-fi, which I think you can. And
you mentioned Alien earlier.
Yeah, there's no way that Ridley Scott wasn't influenced by Solaris in both Blade Runner and Alien.
Lived in, dirty, used,
His reason to do that was Tarkovsky met with like cosmonauts and like some of the people who were involved with like early space program stuff for them, and like talked about like what does it look like and like what should we expect, what should we go for. So they just had like, you know, wires and things kind of as soon as he gets on the station, there's like a fire, an electrical fire that's starting.
It is a weird looking station, man. Like
it is super. And so to get to the point is, I think it's intentionally almost hokey looking. Like all the buttons and knobs and everything look almost like plasticky and fake at times. And then there are times that it looks like better. There's like big circles
and like what's going on. There's like these
panels.
big instrument panels or what, I don't know, even with that, like they're like almost like computer towers or something. I don't know what they were trying to be, and they're like crooked in the hallways, and they're like at different angles,
and there's just shit everywhere. There's like broken fucking
shit everywhere,
beakers and like
there's like there's stuff that shouldn't be there too. I think is important. Like there's a child's ball and stuff, and we've heard that this is a station designed for 85 people, and now there's only 3 people on it, including him, theoretically. Although there's these apparitions, these guests are also there. So
the idea that it's all kind of like purposely not like sleek sci-fi, cool looking.
Yeah, I like that. I thought that was cool.
I like it, but I also think like there was an intention to like make it like, is this all like a facade or something like that? This is after 2001. He could have made a decision to make it look grand, but he didn't want the technology to be like, oh, cool, look, like that's the thing. Because again, that's not the kind of person he was, Tarkovsky. He kind of was anti that. So he was like, look how fucking dingy and bullshitty this is, and like how like your dream of it may not be, you know, as grand as 2001 or something like that. That's kind of like selling you the future of space travel. And it's like, I think Tarkovsky almost felt like he was lying to the audience and saying like, you know, going that far is to say like, it's to keep you distracted or get you away from Earth or something like that.
Right. And this feels a little more authentic to me. I can see that. I like it. So he meets Snout for the first time, who I thought was well performed here. There's a certain sort of, he's a bit loose. He's lost it a bit, this version of Snout, and I liked that element here. And this guy definitely conveys that. Warns him about like, you know, you don't know what you're gonna see here, but be ready for it. And then he goes to Gabarian's unit, whatever it was, place. So he wants to like figure out what actually happened to him, and he has left a video for him to watch, which I thought was nice for the visual medium instead of like a letter, which I think is what it was in the book. And he watches this video where he's talking about the things he's experienced. And I just kept getting this like weird sense that that there's a lot of overlap here between Kelvin and Gabarian. And in fact, like I think in Gabarian's place, not just the horse, I feel like there were several other things that directly had mirrors with his home and what we had just seen prior, and I don't know why. And it's like they're trying to set them up as if they are the same person in a way, or that he is like, could Kelvin be a creation of Solaris and Gabarian's guest in a way, who's come to see Gabarian now? and it's like another guest that has come and has himself all of these memories are actually Gabarian's, not really even his. I don't know. I was like going way down that sort of rabbit hole as I was thinking about
And
it.
I thought that when he first got there, I'm like, how do like Sartorius and Snout know that he's not another guest?
Well, I think
Also,
there's a
like,
little bit of doubt at first
verify it.
from Snout of like, are you real or not? Yeah.
Yeah, but then he eventually like manifests his own guests or something, and maybe so that's like
well,
a
and also like
possibility.
I think they've heard something about him coming, but they're out of their minds a bit, so that makes sense. But I like that sort of disorientation. That stuff is all really cool, and I don't know that I'm fully on board with that theory, but I think there is something to it, a little bit that what if Kelvin is himself a guest?
And I think in the way that like ambiguous storytelling is, and this is very much that, you can take it that way. I think you can totally interpret the film that way because there's enough weirdness going on that would let you believe it. And I think it's like, do I think that Tarkovsky was like, oh, I'm going to make it so that he's a guest and all that kind of stuff? No, but I think he left the door open.
You notice that too, right? Like in Gabarian's place, like there's stuff directly referencing that house. There was like the anatomical figure, I think, is in the corner, and it looks just like it.
I just didn't know if they had like such similar interests and that was what he was trying to evoke.
And that could be all it is. Yeah. But let's move on from that because I think that is a whole rabbit hole. Back with what is definitely happening is we see evidence of these guests, right? One of them seems to be a little girl that was a guest of Gabarian's. We see her hand, I think, at the end of the video shows up. We also get the idea that Snout has a child, maybe, who is there. There's like a hammock.
Yeah. There was like a jump scare with that, like an ear at one point.
Oh yeah, it was
like
an ear.
Just like sticking out, and then like he like slammed the
and then
door,
the door
in his
closes.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Sartorius, the other one, he has like a little person. It seemed like. I mean, we only see him for a second, but not a child. It seemed to me like an adult little person.
Yeah.
That was very out of the blue. Didn't know what that purpose of that was or what the meaning of that was.
I think the film definitely makes it more clear that Sartorius is like experimenting on his guests in some way because he keeps being like, you got a nice specimen there with Hari.
Oh, yeah,
Harry, later in the film.
He does,
I think he's like
Kelvin really doesn't like him. From the jump, he's like, you're a terrible person.
Well, he's like, get me a blood sample from her and like all this other stuff. And yeah, there's something going on. Like clearly, I think we're supposed to know that like in that door where he's like, I'll come out, you don't come in for his like lab or whatever, his room. I feel like he's like torturing or
what's he been doing?
Experimenting, trying to figure out like scientifically what's going on with these entities.
Yeah. He was interesting. He was another hard one to sort of pin down what he represented. Other than like maybe science going too far. Hari's appearance, very fascinating, like you said, lit really cool, like from behind. Slipping into bed with him. The dress without the seam was something right out of the book that I like to see here. It was creepy to see, right? Like the idea of this, it's almost right, but it's not quite. And what does that say about the person underneath the dress, right? Like almost the person, but not the person, and something is off, and like it might not be apparent what it is. And then of course her like tearing through the door, which again a little hokey. I don't know, like the sounds of it that looked like tinfoil, like, and then she's like got blood all over her all of a sudden. But whatever, the moment stands. This is like a cool moment, and the implications of it were interesting. We see her rapidly heal. All of that sort of comes across. These moments were all spoiled for me from the book because I knew they were going to occur, so they may have had more of an impact had I not read. On the other hand, I think I also understood much more about what was going on because I had read the book. At least it's like what the like underlying story is, if not necessarily what all the symbolism means and what story beyond that Tarkovsky might be trying to tell.
So there's another important element to the film that in a similar way to the car sequence, there's these long extended sequences of the characters staring at art or just like shots panning across of art.
Just like a specific painting that gets a really long, or maybe it's multiple paintings, I'm not sure. It's like a bunch of like horse riders in snow. There's some little tiny figures of this town. We spend a lot of time looking at that painting very, very closely. And I was not sure why and what the purpose of that was.
So the set of Solaris features paintings by the old masters. The interior of the space station is decorated with full reproductions of the 1565 painting cycle of the months by Pieter Bruegel the Elder and details of landscape with the fall of Icarus and the hunters in the snow.
Icarus famously flew too close to the sun. That's another
Right.
metaphor for man's overreach, potentially.
Technologically. There's also a shot near the end of the film where Kelvin is like kneeling in front of his dad and they're like embracing. And apparently that's an allusion to The Return of the Prodigal Son, a painting from 1669 by Rembrandt.
He also hugs Hari in a very similar way during a scene.
Yeah, I noticed that, yeah. And that's similar when I think she's looking at art at that point too. And then he eventually, because it's like around the time that they're having
art
that
references.
debate.
Sometimes I miss those. That makes sense.
The references and allusions are Tarkovsky's efforts to give the young art of cinema historical perspective, to evoke the viewer's feelings that cinema is a mature art. He wants to try to give some legitimacy to it, and especially, this is, how old is this, 50 years old now?
Yeah.
And he's trying to like add weight to these scenes because, again, these pieces of art have so much like built-in universal story to them and in universal like understanding, like the Icarus one, like that's a quick one. Oh, Icarus, what is that? It flew too close to the sun. I would like to spend more time diving more into like paintings and art as a whole, but I haven't. So I assume the hunters in the snow and the months, these other paintings that are like really massive pieces of work
means something.
have similar kinds of meanings. Yeah, like Icarus.
Yeah.
So for him, I don't know, for him to add those to those scenes
It's
and
cool.
like it's cool even if you don't know the context too, because art is so interpretive in that way, especially painting. You can just look at it and you can kind of get what he's getting at. Like you don't need all the story and what the actual painting
It is a bit pretentious though. Like we have to kind of acknowledge that, right? Like it's assuming that the audience for this is going to know these, things. And I have mixed feelings about it,
And I take it as somebody who doesn't necessarily know it. It feels like to me, I'm like, oh, maybe I should educate myself on these.
Sure.
And like have that like touchstone that other people do going forward.
Yeah, it's cool. Let's get back to Hari though. So Hari is sort of trying to reckon with her own inhumanity and humanity. At times asserting that she is human. She tries to drink water though, and it doesn't seem to really go down. Like it doesn't seem like she can really like swallow it. Which I thought was an interesting moment, especially when you connect with like how much water has been important throughout everything, how it seems to be equated with life, and then also like the equation with Solaris itself as a liquid. But then also at other times she's recognizing how she is not human, and she says like I'm not her, and he says, oh, you're not her, you're someone new. Ever since I first realized you were someone new, you became someone different, and now I love the new you. In some ways that makes sense to her, but in other ways, like clearly that's not enough, and she's still sort of on the suicidal path. And then we keep talking about how like there was another Hari that you launched into space, and the more I think about it, the more cruel that moment really is. If we're to take for face value, like or take, and not even face value, just like accept the sort of proposal that like Hari is similar enough to where maybe we should be considering her basically a human. When he launches that other version of her, like she's still out there. We don't know if she needs food. We don't know if she needs to breathe. And if that's true, like everything he loves about this Hari, he should love about that Hari, and that Hari he launched into space.
I think near the end, Snout says something about like if you leave the station eventually, like who knows if she'll like stay around and everything like that. So maybe we can think that
maybe they won't last.
Yeah. So maybe she didn't. We don't know.
But I think in the book she's just in orbit. I think she doesn't leave the orbit of the place. Like she's just in orbit around the planet.
So I also think yes. So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I do think he also made that decision at a time that he didn't understand the stakes or the game.
Definitely.
He launched her, and like that's another. It's so interesting this film because it's grappling with trauma at the same time as love. Because he's lost this love, and now he's found her again, and yet she's doomed to repeat the same cycle of what she went through in life. And he even says like he didn't love her at some point. Like he worries that like the reason she killed herself was that she realized that he didn't love her or something like that. So he clearly was cruel to the original Hari that existed in the world, that was his wife, and she ended up killing herself, and that's something that he lives with. And then we get this new version. He gets a new lease on life in the way that he's able to live selfishly with Hari again. And he's like, I don't care about this, the science behind any of this. I don't care about any of it. And to me, in this story, that makes Hari real. Like, I think of Hari as a living being, person in every sense of the word in the story, because I think through the performance and through what the character is given in this sense, she shows every sign of humanity and every sign of what it means to be alive as far as I'm concerned. And then the tragedy that befalls them here, like, it is it's such a sad story. And there's like clearly, like, as short of a period of time as we share with Hari and Kelvin, like, I genuinely felt that there was love there, and like he did truly fall back in love with her. And then he's grappling with this, like, but this isn't natural. Again, this is like not real. This is not a human being seemingly. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you can't love that thing. You know what I mean? I think that's where it kind of
then that leads me to question, then, how do you feel about the end, right? Like, I know we're kind of skipping ahead, but like at the end, he is now back at his house with his father. But he even recognizes his water's pouring into the house as he walks up to it. Something's wrong here. It's not quite right. But it would seem that if you say Hari's real, then he's really with his father in a sense.
Yeah, a version, not his actual father, but a version, a replication.
But in that sense, but like, I viewed this as empty to me.
It's real enough to him. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Because he seems like he's staying there. He made a decision to go down there, I think. He made a decision to
I agree.
To go.
To him, it's real enough, but to me, I think it's empty. It's like he's accepting this empty version.
Yeah.
Which is tragic. Ultimately, I felt like it was a tragic ending.
Okay, so it's almost like a reality that he's been able to recreate. Like, he lost Hari, he lost her again. His relationship with his father isn't good, we can tell. His father's probably not going to be around for that much longer based on his age in the real world. Who knows how long he's been in space. I wonder if this is his way of being like, this is some sense of reality that I can accept. And in that way, it's not necessarily a tragedy. It's maybe a tragedy because he's isolated himself into an entity that who knows its motivations. But if he's able to have that sense of hope and that sense of like fulfillment, I don't know if that is tragic. I don't know.
I think he recognizes that it is not real, right? Because when he sees the water, he looks sad. Like, the look on his face is one of, oh God. When he sees the rain inside the house, like, that's his sign that, like, this is not right. This is not actually, I'm not actually home. And yet he still embraces his father in that way, right? So it's like he realizes that it is empty, but yet it's enough, or it's what he has, and he's willing to accept it. It's interesting because it's like why is it? I think it's like the promise of these miracles is so alluring, because and I'm kind of drawing on the book a little bit, right? Like this idea that the miracles will continue is alluring enough to where he says, I'm going to stay here even though I know that it's torturous, one, and two, like, I can't trust that it is real. It maybe is real, but I don't know for sure. And yet I'm going to stay anyway.
Yeah. There's a symmetry to the whole story as well, too. Like, right. Like, it starts out at the house, it ends at the house. And like, so much of the story seems like it's back around to the same thing again. Like Hari's suicide comes back around. She commits suicide again in a sense. So like, is that an inevitability? And like, is his relationship with his dad, even in this version, just like fated to be just as estranged or whatever it seemed like it was?
Well, in a way, you could say we're all trapped in our memories. We're all trapped in our history. We're all trapped in our upbringing. And so in a sense, even though he recognizes that this is a memory, he is powerless to resist it, maybe. Like, he can't. Like, he's trapped there. For good and bad, for good and ill, I guess. Let's talk about the dream sequence a little bit, because this is another just really wild moment in the movie. Series of scenes. This is the part where there's a lot of switching in between Hari and his mother. What does it all mean? We get some weird dream sequences in the book, for sure. So to me, this is definitely a Solaris, like, entering the mind. And these dreams are being given to him. Some of them, and also, like, we've already, like, blurred the line between dreams and reality. So, like, some of this is maybe dream as we think it, but then some of it might be like a living dream that he's actually experiencing.
Yeah. In whatever way, whether it's intentional or not, he's creating a reality for himself in this dream, or Solaris is. And he lost his mom when he was seemingly younger than we meet him, obviously. And I think like getting to relive some of his childhood, some of like when life was simple, some of when I think that dream just basically represents like his realization that life on Earth is tragic, it's happy, it's all of those things, and like I think he misses his mom in a sense, and he misses Hari, but they're both gone, and then that like kind of accelerates us into the part of the story where Solaris doesn't manifest his mom and Hari for him on the ground on the planet. It manifests his dad in an interesting way, which is just mirroring what he still had. So I think like there's some part of me that feels like since he made the decision at home, he burned all his shit. He made a decision he's never coming back. For everyone's sake, maybe it's just like a final thing for him, and he's able to just say like, I'm going to move on with life because there's nothing left for me here. Yeah. And then Solaris does offer through the dreams his mother and Hari, and then eventually the thing that he does have left that, like you said, maybe seems like enough to him in his dad and the house that he loves. Clearly he dreams about it a lot and thinks about it a lot. Yeah. So I think that the dream is just like an extension of the ending in a way.
Yeah, I think in that dream, I believe it's Hari, but maybe it was the mother again. This is one I actually didn't rewind and watch again. Maybe I should have, but one of them's eating an apple. And so I was like, that's a direct connection back to the apple and the forbidden knowledge. What he is now experiencing is forbidden. This shouldn't be possible. These people have died, and yet they're now back. And there's going to be a cost to that. During a conversation with Sartorius, I believe it is Chris Kelvin who says this. He says, whenever we show pity, we ravage ourselves. Maybe it's true. Suffering makes life seem dismal and suspect. But I won't accept that. No, I won't accept that. Is that which is indispensable to life also harmful to it? So this is something that I saw a couple times. I also saw this with Burton, where they're talking about morality, and they're talking about morality, and Kelvin says knowledge is only valid when it's based on morality, and then I believe it's Burton who says man is the one who renders science moral or immoral, but he rejects it. He's like, no, just like make a judgment, or he sort of asserts that there is an essential truth. And so this is kind of a similar thing where I think we're getting at the heart of the difference between the book and the movie, where the book tries to say there is no essential truth here. And in a sense, I feel like Tarkovsky is rejecting it. He's saying, I can't accept that, right? Yeah. He's saying what Kelvin's saying here. And so that I think does move the message slightly.
For sure.
He doesn't accept that there is no truth here.
Yeah, in a strange way, I felt like when we read the book, I was like, oh yeah, any way that you come down I like the way that the book stayed open, because any way that you come down seems like it has an opposite reaction kind of thing. So it's like, and I like that about the book, but I think somehow Tarkovsky found a way of coming down on it in a way that satisfied me, that I would have otherwise thought not possible. Because I would have thought, oh, if you come down, you're making it less interesting. You're making it less complicated. But he does it in this way that brings it down into still a highly interpretive way. You can take it as like a religious thing. You can take it as a love thing. You can take it as the pursuit out in the cosmos of trying to find yourselves. And that comes back down to the ultimate, one of the major messages that I think is from the book as well. But this idea that like, Snout says, we don't need other worlds, we need mirrors. And like that's what people are going out to seek. That's what humanity is
looking for ourselves. That's something right out of the book too, yeah.
And so the way that Tarkovsky is taking that, reflecting it back on the film, and it's not possible for Tarkovsky to say this is the meaning of life. I think he's leaning towards saying like love, humanity, connection, nature, all of these like natural things that he loves. But at the same time, whereas the book was saying there's no answer here, he's saying the answer is within. The answer is us. The answer is already in front of us.
Around the time we get this really tight zoom in of his ear.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. But also Snout is telling him at this moment, he says, don't worry about the meaning of life. Like, let it go. Which was, an interesting message to have here. I don't know why we zoom into the ear. I don't know if you have a theory about that or not. Like, are we entering the mind maybe through the ear canal?
As I watched it, I literally was like, I wonder if he's just doing this because it's kind of odd.
Yeah,
I really was.
There's
like,
definitely a chance that people do that shit. Like, that would be weird.
I'm like,
let's do that.
Why go into this guy's hairy ear?
We've definitely zoomed in on eyes many times in film, right?
Yeah,
but this time he chooses the ear,
the hairy ear,
the hairy ear.
Yeah, and we just sit on it, and I'm like, man, this is kind of a little like, I don't know, biological or something. Like,
yeah, well, and then this is transitioning to this moment where he seems to be back on Earth. Right, he's walking along the water. The dog runs out to greet him. The dog from that we saw earlier. He's got the plants. He's got the little case, and that's why I was like, oh, there's a real symmetry here with the beginning and the end. And so I see it as like this is something he brought with him, but maybe this also helped Solaris to build this, like this little piece of home that he brought with him, much like what he brought in his mind. Like it's a physical thing that he brought with him. So maybe that's how it's able to create this island. Also, there was the encephalogram thing where like his mind was shot into Solaris. So and then that changed things once that happened. So he's got this real connection now with Solaris as an entity. And then he creates this version of his memory that he appears to be trapped in. And whether or not that's a good thing, and whether or not he likes it or is sad about it, I think is open to interpretation, I guess. But
yeah, I think Tarkovsky himself would say it's a bad thing.
Yeah,
I think that like me seeing the character, I'm like, okay, well, if that's what the character wants, what does that mean? Is it a good thing, bad thing? Is it some evolution of like the human experience? I don't know.
He's trapped here, but he should have tried to escape it.
I think he's saying he's trapped here, but it was foolhardy in the first place to leave what he ends up with. Yeah. Something like that is what I think Tarkovsky is getting.
Interesting. All right, man. So we've gone on super long. It's such a deep movie. I think there's a reason that we have a lot to talk about here, and I feel like we're still skating over some things. But I think we've got to the point now where we've got to come down. Book versus movie.
You can start. Yeah, you can start. I know where I'm at. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool movie. Really cool book, too. We talked about it last week with Lem. Really interesting guy, story in and of himself. If you haven't listened to that episode, definitely check it out. We talk about his background and why he wrote the book that he did. Tarkovsky, clearly a legendary filmmaker. There's so much to sink my teeth into in this movie. I came into it kind of expecting, I don't know, man. I came into this project not really knowing where I was going to land. I didn't expect to love the book as much as I did. In the movie, I expected to be this heady, like really difficult to maybe parse, but ultimately a really just like rewarding experience watching, and it was all of those things. I think it comes down to a matter of taste and a matter of message and emphasis. For my taste and what I'm interested in reality and existence and the things I like to contemplate about it, I find the book to be slightly more in my wheelhouse. It's slightly more aligns with how I think about the world, and it to me it has a little bit more to it in substance. Certainly not in form. I think obviously it's words on a page, right? It takes place in our minds as we read it. Whereas this is a visual piece of art that we are interacting with in a very different way. So while I will fully grant that I've only seen this movie once, and maybe I need to watch it again before I can even really know. I've also only read the book once, and based off of that, I'm gonna choose Lem here. I'm gonna choose the book.
I can't fault you for that. I think this is the type of movie that, of course, I recommend you rewatch at some point. But it's difficult, right? Like, it's challenging. It's trying to do something like unlike any other film. And in doing that unfamiliar territory makes it a little less approachable for sure. Or maybe a lot less approachable. But yeah, for me, I mean, I just can't think of anything that's like this abstract and like artistically rich and like, I don't know, just so well executed and such a singular, bold vision. This film just like, it's so much of what I like, and in a modern sense, I think is owed to this film. And then Tarkovsky as a filmmaker, like the way that he approaches it as art, and like so much of film unfortunately ends up being like these commercial works because it costs so much to make,
Yeah.
and then it needs to make money back. And in that
This
world,
is super art house. I don't know if that's the term
that
that applies to the movie that from this era, but like this feels very art house to me, which is cool.
Seeing things like this that like exist purely out of like the sheer will of an artist, and like and that's not interested in like if audiences are going to walk away saying like this is such a good movie and these are the reasons why. And the fact that the film has connected in that way, I think, is a miracle, right? Like he took a massive swing here.
Yeah. It's one thing to aspire to make that. It's another thing to actually make something that does that.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah. So for all those reasons, like I'm taking the movie here. The book is excellent. I think the book has really cool, heady ideas that we love to dig into on the podcast. We love to talk about these kinds of topics and like what they mean.
This is one where like if we didn't force ourselves to choose here, this is one I would happily not choose between because they're both so cool in their own right.
And they're fairly different, right? Like you said, like in approach. But yeah, I mean, the film, it's one of the most gorgeous films I've ever seen, ever put on celluloid. Like it's incredible. And then, I mean,
that feels right, man.
It's endlessly like interpretable, right? Like there are literally film historians and like film critics still talking about this film to this day and its impact and what it means. So that counts for a lot, I think, there as well.
Yeah, and when I say that it feels right, I mean that it feels right that you're taking the movie and I'm taking the book here. I think sometimes that feels right for our podcast, considering our roles, and also just how legendary these figures are. We are going to announce our next project, if you can wait but a minute more at the end of the episode. If you enjoyed our coverage of Solaris, book or movie, please let us know in the comments. Let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. If you like this kind of like long form discussion of a 70s Russian film, let us know. Like share the love with us. Leave us a rating and review. It really helps our show.
And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all of those at Ink to Film.
And if you'd like to support this podcast in another way, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm. We'd love to have your support on there. Every month we release bonus episodes. We just did one on Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, which I'm sure everybody listening to this episode in particular must be massive fans of. But, we found some stuff to talk about with that movie. Very, very different kind of film than what we're talking about here. Also, if you'd like to hear us talk about the other version of Solaris, that's where that's going to appear. In fact, I would say it's probably going to be one of our next ones we're going to do. So if you want to hear what we're going to think of the George Clooney film, definitely check out our Patreon.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right. Next up, we are covering a bit of an unusual one, but we have a guest lined up who's going to help us sort of dig into it. And that's going to be Ghost World, which was a comic first before it was adapted into a film, I think in the early 2000s. I have never seen the film and I've never read the comic. So I'm going into this completely blind, but I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm a huge graphic novel comic person in general. Like it's like something that I grew up on and I still love to engage with. Never read this, and I've never seen the movie. So this will be completely fresh for me. But the person that we have lined up, big fan of the work. So we're excited to get to know it in that way.
Cool. All right. Hopefully you join us next week for that. And until next time,
keep adapting.